Rabbi Menachem Margolin, our friend, we welcome you. Thank you for coming. The co-founder of Shema Institute, Mrs. Ruth Descalopoulou, very difficult name for you. Thank you very much. And especially with your organizing a share of this conference. The State Secretary of Civil and Social Affairs of Hungary and Director of Hungary, we welcome you. I hope all of you got this specialist. Do you have them? Do you have these? Okay. Because this is so well organized, so we have these photographs and all the names on the paper. So we welcome you. And our director of the Salux non-governmental organization, Mr. Johannes de Jong. We welcome you. My dear friends, I know that all of you are eagerly expect the content of this conference, so let me start by a couple of words. When Alexander Solzhenitsyn, in his famous book, The Gulag Archipelago, translated into many languages, probably all of our languages, we are from the nation, from which nations we come here. He describes the intriguing techniques of arresting people, and he wonders over surprising phenomena. People arrested by the state service barely resist. They did not oppose, no shouting, no screaming. In many cases, they even followed instructions of their persecutors and kept quiet. It almost looked like they conformed to the regime in this breaking point of their life. And Solzhenitsyn, who himself was arrested and failed short of any resistance, offers several explanations. Innocent people, who constitute majority of arrested ones, were simply shocked. They saw captions almost on a daily basis, but they merely refused to believe that this could happen to them. If you read the book, there were sometimes described situations like somebody not knocking, but bashing the doors on some other levels of the housing flat, and nobody just went out to see what's happened because they knew what is going on there. They didn't want to be involved. They were so rather kept themselves behind the doors. So they simply choose not to believe this can happen to me and to my family. Others felt ashamed, and thus, when the moment of arrest came, they did not want their neighbors or fellow citizens in the street to see this disturbing scene. Others, and Solzhenitsyn was one of them, still waited for the right moment. There were not enough people for this testimony. What difference does it make if 200 or 2 times 200 people witness this? Solzhenitsyn may be hard on himself and all the victims of the monstrous Soviet regime, but one obvious lesson shines above all. The freedom is not for granted. We can be stripped of it easily, rapidly, shockingly. Freedom that was costly won yesterday can be quickly lost in tomorrow's battle. So it is never too late, this is never too think out loud, and also never too late to do that. The influence of the social media is our society's blessing and curse at the same time. We need to be smart and use its potential to reach to ignorant people who are fed just by the mainstream narrative, often undermining and mocking conservative values. And we see this so often, so many times nowadays. Unlike poor citizens of USSR, We shall rather not keep quiet when the freedom of speech, freedom of press, and freedom of religion is seriously attacked. Tomorrow might be too late. Too late. The mainstream media has a habit of shaming everyone with an opposing opinion. Regrettably, even in this House we have seen stories of people who were treated as second class just because they believe life has to be protected from the conception till the natural death. That marriage means one man and one woman. That the state of Israel has a right to exist and defend itself. Bible teaches us that our enemy, I mean evil, is using humiliation as a primary mean of gouging us. We need to remind ourselves the words, fear not. That is our strongest weapon. And that means speak out. Don't be ashamed. Ladies and gentlemen, this gathering of people believing in a free society, in honorable exchange of opposing views, in respect for your political rival, is a proof we are not alone. Make friends and encourage each other. Share your stories. It took several decades for the Soviet Union to cease its existence, but it fell. Nevertheless, it was by the bravery of the few by which the regime fell, and we can enjoy freedom. And I say this as a member of a former Soviet Union satellite state, Slovakia. Nowadays, more than ever, the threat of totalitarian thinking is coming also from the West, from the very cradle of democracy and freedom. So let us recognize this threat, speaking out, and offer an alternative. Welcome to this conference.
Okay, so I'm the moderator today. I'm the organizer. My name is Ruth Daskalopoulou Isaac. Thank you all for coming, especially the Hungarian Embassy. It is an honor to have you. And thank you for kindly bringing your State Secretary. I'm just going to say quickly that we are live. The link is on SEMA Facebook page, and then you can retweet it from there. And if anyone needs any more information, maybe they can just write there directly. I want to start by saying that freedom of speech, the reason why I decided to organize this event, I personally, I'm sure my guests here, all of you know that we are saying that Europe without the Jews is not Europe. But I also think that Europe without freedom of speech is not Europe. And unfortunately, we see more and more censorship or more and more attacks on freedom of speech and also freedom on religion. And yesterday I had a conversation with somebody that he opposes my views, but he said to me that I have to say that the one place where I saw freedom of religion, that was at the Western Wall, because I can see that the Jewish people really respect freedom of religion and they allow anybody to go and pray at the Western Wall, whilst at the top of the mountain, that's not the case necessarily. And I said, yes, that's right. And then he's somebody that opposes my views and opposes my support for Israel. He said to me, it's true, freedom of religion must have started with the Jewish faith. So I thought that was very sweet to be coming from him. So, so this event is about freedom, and unfortunately we had a lot of non-freedom voices, and we had a lot of opposition towards this event. And I just think that this shows where we are today in Europe. But we're not here to hear from me, we're here to hear from our panel. I'm very happy to be moderating today. And I think we should first hear from our co-organizer, Saluk's director, Johannes de Jong. And Johannes, thank you for being with us.
Ruth, thank you for all your very hard work. I know what you went through for this, and thank you so much for that. And it's my pleasure and honor to share this panel with you and with Mr. Prager and with Rabbi Menachem Margolin. I hope I pronounce it correctly. Of course, with the president of the ECPM, Mr. Blansgraf Skripek. When it comes to freedom, a few weeks ago, there was a very funny incident in Scotland. I read about it on several places. And that was that a group of gender activists attacked a group of feminist activists. Then I was like, it's interesting that every group basically wants freedom of speech for itself, but has a difficulty to give that also to others. And we see this everywhere. We see this literally everywhere, from the left to the right and vice versa. But we have to understand very deeply, and that is that freedom is fragmented. You cannot have freedom just for you. Freedom is a one whole for all. It's one for all. And all freedom is also for every single one person. Why? Because ultimately it is founded on the fact that we all share the same human dignity. And that is something that we cannot differ from person to person. Human dignity is one for all. And on that fact, our freedom is based. Our fundamental freedoms come from this fundamental truth. As a Christian, I say, this is the fundamental reality that the European Union is founded upon. Well, one can disagree with that. And that's fine with me, because that is what freedom is about. I've had the honor of my life to work 5 long years on the Syria dossier together with the Syrian Democratic Forces and the Autonomous Administration of Syria, and I've learned one thing from that: how precious freedom is, and how much it is grounded in this acceptance and sharing idea of human dignity. And this idea of fundamental freedoms founded on human dignity, this is what we've been working on as SALUX and ECPM for the last 5 years. And together with our members and our partners, we'll continue to do so for the next 5 years. And in that regard, this is a great event, because on the one hand, it's a closure, and on the other hand, it's an opening for the next session of the European Parliament for the next 5 years. So this is a great moment, and I thank everybody for being here, and all the organizers and panelists for being part of it. Thank you so much.
And now I have the honor and the privilege of introducing the European Jewish Association founder, Rabbi Margolin, a good friend and somebody who very humbly accepted the invitation to cooperate for this event. And we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much. So, MEP Skripek, our host, State Secretary Mr. Solej Bobovnitsky, Mr. Prager, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I really would like to congratulate you, Ruth Isaac, for the great achievement in organizing today's conference. It is. Someone told me it is a punishment to speak next to Mr. Prager, but I think that the huge difference between us will only make your speech to be more prominent, and if as a consequences it will be more influential. I'm very happy with this achievement. I thank you very much for your visit to Brussels, and I thank you very much for all what you do. Your tremendous job makes so many Jews to be much more proud of their Jewishness. Thank you so much for what you do. Jewish people is educated always to look at the positive sides, on the half part or the half full part of the cup, and on what we still can achieve. They say about a prominent Jewish leader that when he was a child, together with his friends, he was climbing on a tree. All the children fell down, but this prominent rabbi succeeded to climb until its end. He was asked, "What is your secret?" And he answered. He says, all other children were looking down. They got scared and they fell down. But if you look to the top, if you look further, you do not fall down. This is our way, always to look further, not to look to the back, not to look down. And this is the only way to achieve what we still have to achieve. But unfortunately, all those we do want to look only at the positive sides of everything, but today we are forced to speak about what is still not good. And this is the fact that despite European leaders' declarations that they do not want to see Jews leaving this continent, we still see so many legislators in this continent that initiate bills that aim to ban fundamental Jewish customs, such as circumcision or ritual slaughter, and actually limiting the possibilities of Jewish life in Europe. And this is very sad. It is very sad because Europe is a continent with an history of so many wars and victims, and in too many cases, it was related to the lack of tolerance towards other religion. In 1948, the United Nations adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which of course include freedom of religion. And here is the exact text. Everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right includes freedom to change his religion or belief, and freedom, either alone or in a community with others, and in public or private, to manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance. When European countries adopted this declaration, they knew already the Jewish customs, such as ritual slaughter and circumcision, because the Jewish people observed this tradition for over 3,300 years. And it's a part of European culture for the over last 2,000 years. We do not speak about new customs that Jewish communities invented in the last years. So how could come leaders that declare that they would like to see Jews living in Europe and at the same time to promote legislation that aim to ban fundamental Jewish customs? Of course, officially, those politicians declare that their aim is children's rights and animal welfare. But the truth is that in most cases, freedom of religion has become a political battlefield. I really wish, that those politicians who seek to ban circumcision really concerned about the health of the Jewish children in Europe. To those politicians I say, please do not be concerned only about the Jewish children. Please be concerned about the entire Jewish community. Fight anti-Semitism, allow freedom of religion, and ensure our security. Because a law against ritual slaughter, a law against circumcision, is a law that clearly says that all Jewish parents are not reliable to raise their kids, and therefore they need politicians to pass legislations that will protect the children from their own parents. A legislation against ritual slaughter is a legislation that says that we cannot trust the Jewish people, the same nation that brought to the world the animal welfare. This is the same politicians that support hunting, who support procedure of slaughter that harm millions of animals in every country in Europe, but they keep concentrate time after time in the very few animals that are slaughtered in the most careful way for the Jewish people. But we shall not be discouraged. We will keep demanding from the European leaders to be what they presume to be, leaders of everyone, to stand firm against the darkness that is presumed to be progress, against the lies that presume to present the truth, and against the racism that presume to be the keeper of civilians' lives. Thank you very much.
When the first time I told Rabbi Margolin that I managed to get Dennis Prager as the speaker, his reply was, wow, you know. And we are very honored that you are with us, and finally this event is happening. And it was the European Jewish Association who arranged for the Hungarian State Secretary, His Excellency, Mr. Vince, I'm going to try to pronounce it, okay? Salai Bobrovnitsky. Is that okay? It is an honor that you're with us, and thank you so much for the work that you're doing to promote Jewish life in Europe, and we look forward to hearing your speech.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm really honored to be here in such a prestigious circle here and also with you. Dear ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the invitation that in a certain way goes back to the great work of our embassy. That's one point, and the second one is that to our friendship with the Rabbi Menachem Margolin, with whom we have very fruitful conversations in the interest of Jewish communities in Hungary and also outside of Hungary. Now, let me divide my speech into some parts. In the first part, I would like to speak about the Hungarian situation, if you don't mind. Not very thoroughly, because I don't think that you are that interested in or we should spend too much time with a lot of details. But then I would speak about the Western European situation, if I may, because we have here very tough debates on the situation regarding anti-Semitism and other issues, Holocaust denial, and all these questions. And in the third part, I would speak about the main topic of the conference, and that should be human rights, free speech, free media, where we also have some not very fruitful discussions with European institutions and European leaders who are slowly but surely going out of their office, and this is okay like that. So the Hungarian government, first of all, the short framework to that, the Hungarian constitution of the year 2011, which is the first really democratic constitution. We had a democratic constitution before that, from the year 1989, but this was accepted by a Hungarian parliament where the communists were still sitting, so it was like halfway, but the constitution itself was really a democratic one. Now, we have changed the constitution, and the Hungarian constitution of the year 2011, the Article 7 of that, states freedom of religion. This is very important, and this is practiced in Hungary. The government policy of the Hungarian government, and I can only speak, of course, for the current Hungarian government, practices a complete zero tolerance on anti-Semitism in the criminal code as well. It is declared that it is put down in the criminal code, and it is practiced in the politics as well, where we do not let anti-Semitic tendencies come up, and this is a fact of life. We have, of course, anti-Semitism in Hungary. Nobody would be so courageous to deny it. Nobody wants to deny it. Sphere. There are radicals there, but they are in the number not that high that it would be that we could say that it's a social problem. In the society, we have rather the classical type of anti-Semitism, which is not good, and this is something that we are fighting against. And this is there. We do not deny it, but in Hungary, this doesn't seem to be a big problem, not for the Hungarians and not for the Jewish community. It's very important. The Jewish feeling that the Hungarians or the Hungarian state would act against them. They live in freedom. They live in security. Although we have, I would say that surely the biggest density of Jewish people in Europe in Budapest. Because in Budapest, you have only in Budapest you have almost 100,000 Jewish people living. Altogether, the number of the Jewish people in Hungary is a bit more than 100,000. That means that around 90–95% of the Jewish people are living in Budapest. There are historical reasons for that. I do not want to go into details. Unfortunately, during the Nazi occupation of Hungary, with the collaboration of Hungarian government forces, the Jewish population was taken to Auschwitz. But there was a decision at the beginning of July by Admiral Horthy to stop the deportations, and that more or less saved the life of Budapest Jewry. Of course, later came the Aerocross movement, and there were many killings, unfortunately, but organized deportation have not taken place after the 6th of July, 1944. That's the historical reason why we have in Budapest so many Jewish people, because the Jews from the country were taken away to Auschwitz, but not the Budapest ones. They didn't have the time for it. And there was no, and the Hungarian government at that time, although partially collaborating with the Germans, but also stopping the deportation, they had a very difficult situation. I do not want to, in no way, whitewash it, because you cannot, but still, we have the luck and privilege to have a very lively Jewish life in Budapest that we support with all means. If I may tell you a number which is quite a high one to Hungarian circumstances as well, but also to probably European circumstances. The Hungarian government from 2010, which is led by Viktor Orbán, until now, which is still led by Viktor Orbán, has spent around 30 billion forint, which means around 100 million euros on Jewish community life. Either it is religious life or cultural life. I would make this division, because we have a very active civil life, an active Jewish civil life in Budapest, and also elsewhere outside of the country, outside of the capital, a very active Jewish life, festivals, klezmer music, and all that. You have in the heart of Budapest also active Jewish life. And we, on the other hand, support religious institutions of the Jewish people. That means that we are renovating synagogues, cemeteries, and we do everything that we can in order to keep up this great tradition that we have in Hungary. So the Jewish, as I said, the Jewish compatriots of us, they feel secure in Budapest or in the country. We have measured a very low number of atrocities against Jewish people. Not a physical atrocity has not even happened. You have some verbal atrocities or some silly and unacceptable notes written on house walls and all that, but not physical atrocities. You don't have any in Hungary. There is no atrocity against synagogues. There is no atrocity against cemeteries and all that. I think we can be proud of that because the Hungarian security forces are watching out. The only atrocity that we have, I have to be very honest here, and it's very. It's actually. I'm sorry that this is a fact of life. It comes from the Western European tourists who are. We have articles about that. That's true. That mainly British tourists, but also other tourists are beating up, or not beating up. Sorry, but they are kind of like aggressive towards Jewish people. In Hungary, as I said, we have police cases and press coverage on that. These cases are true, not very numerous, so we keep it under control. But that's a topic in the Hungarian media in the course of the last couple of weeks. If I may ask a politically motivated question. Why do we wonder that, for example, British tourists are acting like that in Budapest if the second largest party of the UK is pretty openly, or the president of this party is pretty openly spreading anti-Semitic ideas? We cannot wonder if things like that happen because they are in connection with that. As in Hungary, this is forbidden, and you cannot do that because you would be politically dead, basically. You don't have this feeling, and the Hungarians, of course, you can never say that the Hungarians are tolerant. Everybody is tolerant. The Dutch, the Slovakians, and all that, they are also tolerant. But you have to, in a certain sense, you have to, sorry for the wording because I don't have a better wording for that, in a certain sense you have to educate your own people, and this is the task of the politicians, to say that what you can do and what you cannot do. And this is that we try to execute politically. So this is more or less the Hungarian situation. Good data, good numbers. As I said, I do not want to say that we don't have sorrowfully anti-Semitic incidents, but they are in the number very low. What we have experienced, and you should know that some friends here who are very eager to find out more about anti-Semitism, they have founded a civil organization which is Action and Protection Foundation. This Action and Protection Foundation is led by people who are close to the Chabad movement in Hungary, and they are researching and they are using researches from Europe, and they are measuring European tendencies. And the Hungarian government supports this foundation. Now we also have a very important European institution, not so very far away from Budapest, in Vienna, the European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights, FRA in short. They are also measuring anti-Semitic actions, and the measuring is a bit worrying. In the major Western states, you have a rising fear of Jewish people, but also not only Jewish people, for their own life, for their own security. You have measurements like above 80% in the, as I said, major European states, France, Germany, UK. There, more than 80% generally, I do not want to go further into details, say that anti-Semitism is a major problem. Now, what we see in the media, in the Western media, and what we see in the Western political scene is that everybody wants to give the blame, the only blame, to the right-wing groups, which are undoubtedly there. But we don't think that this would be really the problem. Of course, you have unfortunately, neo-Nazi and right-wing groups in Germany and elsewhere. But the major problem, and that also is documented in the FRA report, comes actually from the Muslim migration that has happened in Europe already actually long ago, but the major flow started 2015. That's where actually the major part, I do not deny the right-wing extremist background, but the major part is coming from the Muslimic migration. If I may just mention one data which is important from the FRA report. The FRA report clearly shows that in Europe, 30% of the perpetrators hold extremist Muslimic views, 21% hold left-wing political views, and 13% hold right-wing political views. I'm not saying that this is the Bible here, but it is surely a serious survey, and I think that we have to watch out for that. And I think that sorry to say that it will be also a bit political. I think that we do have the right, we Hungarians, although in some countries people are speaking about us in a very, how should I say that, a very irritating manner. But I think that we do have the possibility and we do have the right to say what we see critically somewhere else. We also do have to swallow the critics, and we also do have to take action. If we see that the critics is logical, the critics is okay, we are not fine this and that, and we should change. We have changed on many points. When the second Orbán government from 2010 started to work, we have changed many of our legislation that was criticized by the European Commission. For example, the media law. The media law was criticized on many points, on 4 points, and the government changed it on 4 points. So if there was a will, okay, this time the last example that I can mention you was that there was critics from Europe on the administrative courts in Hungary that were now introduced by the law. We have revised this decision because we said that we do not need this problem with the European institutions. We do not need this tension with the European institutions. So what I would like to say with that is that we can revise our decisions that are probably with some conflicts. We are not, how should I say, we are not stubborn to stick to decisions that might be problematic. Although I can assure you that in the majority of European countries you have administrative courts. But in Hungary we cannot have administrative courts, and we accepted this kind of like not decision but kind of like opinion from European institutions. Now, if I may just for a second still remain with the anti-Semitic topic, and then I go over for the last topic of mine, freedom of speech and so on, and it will be shorter than these parts. I mentioned the situation in Western Europe, and we can state that these are facts, that anti-Semitism is rising. What are the reasons for that? Of course, I'm not a sociologist, and I'm kind of like a politician or a political opinion maker. One of the answers that I can give you is definitely there, that if you look at the numbers, and if you look at some sayings of, for example, Mr. Corbyn, if you look at the numbers of the Jewish people in UK, and if you look at the numbers of people with Muslim religion in the UK, then you see that the second one is according to votes a more relevant group for the Labour Party. That might be one of the reasons that they, I should put it mildly, do not really care about the feelings of people, Jewish people there, because they do not count that much if it comes to an election. That's a very that's painful statement, but I think it's not so far away from the truth. We shall see, because to my knowledge, there will be elections in the UK. Will there be elections in the UK? Well, we will see what happens. Anyhow, it's not only the UK, because we will have elections also in other countries. How the situation turns out, but I can assure you that the Hungarian situation remains firm. And our security forces are there, and it's not only a security question, because the most important issue is that Jewish people have a good life in Hungary. They feel free, they can do whatever they want, and of course they do not speak about it so much like many other Hungarians, but they are also not unhappy about the fact that we defended the country from a an uncontrolled illegal migration and from the invasion of people who are not really the biggest friends of the Jewish people in Hungary or elsewhere. So, freedom of speech and freedom of media. Because it has been touched upon by many speakers tonight. And I would say that let me pose you some questions which might be a bit of conflict, but still, conflict is always good because we can talk about that and we can have nice questions on that. So, my first question is that is it a serious problem in Europe, freedom of speech and freedom of expression? For the moment, I would say no. I don't see any tendencies that anybody would be narrowed in saying their own opinion. Anybody would be obstacled to say its own opinion, from Romania to the UK, from Finland down to Greece, or any other non-member states of the European Union. We have, from the right-wing perspective, what has been already said, we have a problem that whenever we say an opinion, it will be put down as an undemocratic opinion, and then they say that you are building up a dictatorship, and they start with Orbanistan and I don't know what, which is completely bullshit, and you kill the conversation immediately with that. And yes, it is a problem that we have a politically correct dialogue in Europe and in the media as well. Political correctness is something that is guiding the media. But whenever political correctness is there, there is no real debate.
You mean state media? You mean state media?
No, there is no state. There is state media, but I'm not speaking about state media. I'm speaking about politicians, and I'm speaking about media in general. Not the Hungarian, also the European media. I mean, if you read Spiegel, Süddeutsche, Krone, I don't know, Guardian, and all that, the politically correct opinion is the one that you can read there. Whenever it comes to an opinion that we would, for example, say, they either do not let it happen, do not let it publish, or they turn it against us and they say that, okay, these are the dictators, like Mr. Juncker used to greet the Hungarian Prime Minister by arriving to Brussels, that the dictator is coming. How on earth he takes himself the freedom to call my Prime Minister a dictator, and years later he goes to Trier, to the birthplace of Karl Marx, and puts a rest down on the tomb or birthplace, or I don't know, of Karl Marx, who was an openly anti-Semitic philosopher and the founder of this social experiment that they call communism. And this he does in the name of the European Commission, so in the name of all of us, 28 member states. This is something that an example that I cannot forgive him, and I personally, as also, if I may say, as also son of people that raised up in communism and that were risen up in an anti-communist notion. That was my past. That was, and that is my present as well. But going back to the media freedom, we might have here, I mean, we means right-wing, thinkers, might have a problem here because whenever we say something, it is put down as an undemocratic bullshit. Now, do we have to deal with this issue of free media, freedom of speech, and all that? My answer is yes and no. Of course, we have to deal with that, and whenever it turns up, whenever we see that in the world we have situations like that, then of course we can we can criticize that, or we can give advice to it, or we can help, or we can show goodwill for these countries to solve their problems. For example, if I may say, some months ago, I was invited by the government of Uganda, to give advice on the civic law of Hungary, which is a great honor, because I think that, I don't know, I do not care what Mr. Soros thinks about that, but I am proud of our civic law, and I'm very well in picture of what we have put down in our civil law, and the law is okay, so we can give advice not only to Uganda, but also other states as well. Should we interfere? Should we give lessons? No. If we start giving lessons, especially to each other, if governments come up here and they give advice to us, what we should do and what we shouldn't do, whereas if they receive leaders of pretty much openly undemocratic states and they do not say a single word, then we have a problem in Europe, I would say. And I had a very interesting conversation with a very, I would say, knowledgeable person today in Brussels, who had a leading position here in European institutions earlier. And he rightfully said that the Chinese president comes to Brussels or elsewhere, nobody says a single word. But sometimes one has the feeling that Hungary and Poland is the biggest problem of the world. Sometimes we have the feeling, and also, I mean, you know, other countries will come if we do not change our politics. The Romanians are in the pipeline. I hope that Slovakia doesn't get there. But if we start, and that's my last word, if I may say it, if we start politically shooting at each other, that means that inside the European Union, we will go down, and it will be a catastrophe. And no matter what people think about us, we know that we are good Europeans and we are eager Europeans, and we do not want to step out of Europe, but we keep ourselves the right to say our opinion. We would expect, in exchange for that, to listen to this opinion and not to speak about us as if we were nothing and nobody. And that's what we would expect. We would like to make Europe better. It sounds a bit, you know, let's make Europe better. It sounds a bit, how should I say that, too overwhelming. But it's still, I would say that why I cannot have the right as a Hungarian State Secretary to say that we can make Europe better. It's not only the privilege of Mr. Juncker and other people, who, by the way, managed in 5 years of being the President of Commission that the Brits are leaving the European Union and the illegal migrants are in. I wouldn't call it a success. Thank you very much.
The State Secretary warned me this morning. He warned us that his speech that he's preparing is a fiery one, so he delivered, definitely. Dennis Prager always says that free speech is not free, basically that free speech is not about what you think is free, right? And who decides what is acceptable, basically? If you are the judge and if you're the judge and the jury, based on your decision, who you think should speak, then, you know, then just like Johannes said, then you decide that some people should have freedom and some people should not have freedom. I'm personally willing, because I'm a proud European, I'm willing to sit in the same panel with people who I don't agree with. Dennis always and often, I think he says that, unfortunately, young people today say that we believe in free speech, but not in hate speech, right? And then he makes the point that, well, that means that you are just happy to just hear things that you like and not things that you don't like. So that is all I was going to say about free speech. We are now finally having the opportunity to hear Dennis himself speaking. It's an honor that we have you here. And we know that many more people wanted to be here, and unfortunately, because of many other circumstances, could not, but they're following us online. if you have internet, if you can please reshare, that would be grateful. We want more people to hear Dennis. So, Dennis, thank you and welcome once again.
Thank you. Thank you, Ruth, and Rabbi Margolin, and the distinguished representative of Hungary, Mr. Shale Borvanitsky. And all of you here on the dais with me. I'm honored to be with all of you. Thank you for making this possible. I have a lot to say to you. I would like to begin on a light note, given that the Hungarian minister is here. I was in Hungary first, perhaps before he was born, under János Kádár, and I had a very difficult time with his language. Hungarian is a challenge for non-Hungarians. I arrived in Budapest on one of these very fast boats going from Vienna. And it's only, I think, an hour ride, if I recall. And I needed, at the time, I needed the men's room when I boarded. I was 23 or 24 years old. And I thought, well, it's not a problem. I'll just utilize the one on this hydrofoil. But there was none on the hydrofoil, which everyone else knew except me. We arrive in Budapest, and I'm in some pain, but I have to go through communist customs to make sure I wasn't bringing in Time, Newsweek, or Playboy. And so that took another half hour, 45 minutes, and I was in real pain. I finally walk out to a main street, and to my great relief, I realize I don't have to know Hungarian. It says WC. I walk over to this little building that says WC, thrilled that I found it, only to be confronted with two doors. Over one door it said Nok, and on the other it said Furfiak. And let me just say that I didn't really know if I was a Nok or a Furfiak. And this predates the dates of gender fluidity. I did not know. And I looked for an umbrella and a skirt, stick figures, nothing, just Nok, Furfiak. So I stood in the street and I stopped passers-by, and here I am, 6'4", American, 20-something years old, going, hello, Nok, Furfiak? Do you realize what these people must have thought of me? This giant American asking them, are you a man? Am I a man or a woman? And I do not blame them for not answering. Most ran away. And finally, I just figured, look, I can't handle this any longer. Furfiak sounds like female. I'll go into Nok. And sure enough, there were some women in there who then started screaming at me as well. And forever I will know that I am a Furfiak. I actually had a wonderful time there. I've been to Hungary a number of times, both free Hungary and communist Hungary. I want to comment on a few of the things that were said and then speak to you about freedom generally. I got the message making the case for freedom. I see human rights and free speech in Europe today as the subtitle. I will talk about freedom and free speech, but freedom as a larger component, or freedom of speech as a component of the larger issue of freedom. I just want to react to a few things. Mr. Skripek cited the biblical verse, fear not. You might find it of interest to know that the thing that God says in the Bible the most to humans is fear not. And it's too bad that that message was not conveyed, for example, to conservative organizations that backed out of the sponsoring of me because they live with fear. And one of my, I have two lessons about this that I apply my whole life to, and in all of my radio shows and videos and so on. Number one,
the greatest asset of fearing God is that you don't fear man.
Amen.
That is one of the greatest reasons for fear of God as a very important moral concept. In my own life, those who know me know this is true. I only fear God. I don't even fear the New York Times, which in the United States is a much greater fear. It is a much greater fear in America than fear of God. It's not even a question. And that is one aspect. The other is that the rarest of all the good traits, there are many good traits in humans: kindness, loyalty, integrity, honesty, but the rarest is courage. And without courage, the others are useless. And conservative organizations around the world have not demonstrated courage in many instances, and this would be just one of those examples. I don't even know what they stand for, to be honest. If I cannot be sponsored by a conservative organization, who can? I have not uttered a hateful word in my life, and there are millions of words of mine available. 10 books, 30 years of column writing, and 35 years of radio 3 hours a day. That's a lot. I mean, you can catch anybody on anything, but I'm not catchable. I've never said a bad word. I've never said a false word of which I am aware. I'm committed to truth as a God-demanded value. And I just looked now. What did they write about me to scare away a conservative organization from sponsoring this? I put out a video at Prager University where we have 1 billion views a year, and the great majority are under 35 years of age, so this bothers them. I'll tell you who the them is in a moment. And one of the videos it says, we laugh at this one, he wants you. I have a video about having read in a British newspaper that couples have more fights when they take vacations going to the beach than vacations going elsewhere. Why? Because on the beach there are many women in bikinis and the husband or the boyfriend is caught looking at them. So I decided, because I have devoted much of my life to helping people, that's why I have a happiness hour on my radio show, a book on happiness. I have an hour every week called the Male-Female Hour, where I try to help men and women get along better. And the thesis of my video is, yes, he looks, but he wants you. You, his girlfriend, you, his wife. And all it does is help couples have less tension. And these fools that wrote this stuff against me use that as a source. They didn't even say what's wrong with it. They just said their eyes rolled. But I'm used to this. It means nothing to me, my friends. It means nothing. It only is a comment on them and the people who are frightened by this sort of stuff. So much for the fear not, all based on that. I want to comment on a word that, a kind thing that Rabbi Margolin said about me. I make so many Jews proud of their Jewishness. Yes, I think I have in the course of my life, and I am proud of that, but you will find this of interest. I've probably made at least as many people proud of their Christianity. And I've made at least double or triple the number of Americans proud of their Americanness, and hopefully 5 times that number proud of their being Westerners. Because the great tragedy of modern life is this. Jews didn't teach their children what it means to be a Jew. Christians didn't teach their children what it means to be a Christian. Americans didn't teach their children what it means to be an American. And Westerners have not taught their children what it means to be a member of Western civilization. That's the tragedy. And if you don't teach it, you lose it. It's as simple as that. So that when the President of the United States went to Warsaw 2 years ago and said we have to protect Western civilization, the New York Times said this was a dog whistle to white supremacy. Western civilization is now considered at the New York Times a euphemism for white supremacy. If you want to protect Western civilization, that means you want to protect white supremacy. That is how bad things have gotten. Is it any wonder then that vast numbers of Americans and Western Europeans, less so Eastern Europeans, and I told Romanians last year where I spoke in Cluj and Bucharest, I told them, you may save Europe. You may save the West. Eastern Europe might save the West, because I don't see where the salvation's coming from Western Europe. they have such contempt for themselves. At least you don't. Self-contempt is a worthy thing if you're worthy of contempt. But hey, if you gave the world the very notion of universal human rights didn't come from the non-West, no insult to the non-West, just a fact. It's either true or not true. Universal human rights emanated from here. Women's rights emanated from here. Universal democracy emanated from here. Okay? That's pretty big stuff. Slavery ended here. Everybody had slavery. So the only intelligent question, therefore one not asked at universities by definition, because it is intelligent, is not who had slaves, who abolished slavery. It's like the only intelligent question is not who's poor, who created wealth. Poor is the norm. Slavery was the norm. So the only intelligent question is, what is the abnorm? The abnorm, if you will, abnormal is to abolish slavery and abolish poverty. Who did that? Only capitalism has abolished poverty. Only the West abolished first slavery. And I might add, as a Jew, it was Christians who did it. Christians say it, they're accused of having an axe to grind. I don't. My axe to grind is truth. It was Christians who abolished slavery, and then it spread from there. But who learns this stuff? In the United States of America, George Washington owned slaves, James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, the founders of the United States, the freest country in human history. They owned slaves, so they're held in contempt. So that's my work, is to teach people in the West what they stand for before we lose it. And we may very well lose it. We certainly aren't winning. Mr. Shale Baranovsky said, I'm checking Bobrovnitsky. I like getting words correct. I love language. Everyone wants to blame right-wing groups for the anti-Semitism. God, to hear such truth at the European Parliament is worth the whole trip from America. I have to say it was mind-blowing. That's right. If not everyone wants to blame right-wing groups. The left wants to blame right-wing groups. Christians have co-sponsored this speech with a rabbi sitting to my left, your right, Christians over there. I learned very early in my life in America the division was not between Jews and Christians, it was between the left and everybody else. The sooner you know that, the sooner you understand the modern world. If you don't understand that, you cannot morally or politically understand the modern world. That is the only division that matters. In America, there's no black-white division. Blacks and whites get along great in real life. The left hates when they get along great, because a happy black might vote Republican. If a woman thinks men are the enemy, she votes Democrat. If a woman thinks that men are divided among good and bad, just like women are divided among good and bad, and she blames the difficulties of life for her sadness, not men, she'll vote Republican. Happy people are not on the left. I never met a happy leftist, and I just turned 70. They do not exist. There are happy liberals, there are happy conservatives, there are unhappy liberals, and there are unhappy conservatives. But there are no happy leftists on earth. And as I say on my happiness hour every week, the happy make the world better and the unhappy make it worse. The unhappy make it worse. The left makes the world worse. Not liberals, not conservatives. Liberals don't have the courage to fight the left. There are some who do. There's an American professor from Harvard, Alan Dershowitz, lifelong liberal, Democrat, Hillary Clinton supporter, said to me in a movie that will be coming out in America later this year, No Safe Spaces, said to me in his apartment in New York, Harvard professor Alan Dershowitz, as an American, as a liberal, as a Democrat, as a Jew, I fear the left, not the right. That is correct. That is the only group decent people should fear, the left. They are crushing the West, the greatest hope that mankind had. The dark, dark world of humanity. They have really, the West, with all its flaws, has attempted to make this world better and has made it better. But to say that is, for the New York Times, a dog whistle for white supremacy, which is itself a racist comment, because Western values don't know color. I don't give a hoot about color. I don't think there's anybody at this dais who cares about color. We only care about values. But by the way, in America, the University of California, the largest state university in the United States, very prestigious, UCLA, UC Berkeley, and so on, they actually issued, you can see it, it's on the internet. They're proud of it. They have issued racist microaggression statements. In other words, statements that if you make are considered at the University of California in America to be racist. For example, there's only one race, the human race. That is considered racist at the University of California, to say there is only one race, the human race. That is how Orwellian the left has made the world, where if you deny the importance of race, you're the racist. But the last people to make race important were here on this continent, and I won't name their names, but we all know who they were. The greatest affirmers of the importance of race on earth today is the left in the West. The previous emphasizers of the importance of race were called Nazis. I'm not comparing the left to Nazis. They're not building concentration camps, death camps. They're not deporting anybody to death. I get that. It's a big distinction, never to be sneered at. I'm merely making a factual statement that until the left today, the greatest affirmers of the importance of race were the Nazis. The next greatest affirmers are the left. It's an astonishing thing to witness. So when I say race is as important to me, your skin color is as unimportant to me as your eye color or shoe color, I am called a racist. In fact, at the University of Wyoming in America, where I speak a lot of colleges in the United States, and there's always protests and so on, and at the University of Wyoming, the usual, oh, how could we invite this guy? He's a racist and, SIXHERB, sexist, intolerant, xenophobic, homophobic, Islamophobic, racist, and bigoted. I gave it an acronym because it's said so often. So they added, though, because that wasn't enough, and an anti-Semite. Yeah, how do you like that? That's quite an achievement, not only for a Jew, but for a committed Jew. A Jew who's founded a synagogue, a Jew who founded a Jewish day school, a Jew who taught Jewish history at Brooklyn College, City University of New York, a Jew who fought anti-Semitism his whole life, a Jew sent in by Israel to the Soviet Union to smuggle in Jewish items so Jews could pray. I am an anti-Semite because that's what the left does. They don't have arguments, they have smears. They never argue. They can't argue. That's why they never come on our shows. We go on their shows on the rare occasions that we're invited. They never come on our shows because they know they can't debate us. Because we know their arguments, they don't know ours. They study under them, they go to their movies, they dine with them, they marry each other, they never meet us, they don't hear us. We hear them, you can't avoid them. You turn on the television, they're there. You read the major newspapers, they're there. So let me tell you about freedom. This is the first and most important thing that needs to be understood. Freedom is a value, not an instinct. Human beings do not yearn to be free. That is a common misconception. Human beings yearn to be taken care of, not to be free. Okay, that's critical. It's a value, not a yearning. By the way, guess where I learned that? Where I learned most of the wisdom that I have, and I believe I have some, and that is from the Bible. And I'm writing a 5-volume commentary on the Torah for people of every background. It's called the Rational Bible. I pray you'll read it. Nobody writes Bible commentaries to get wealthy, so I have no problem in asking you to read it. Could have written a lot other things that would have made more money. But I will just tell you, I learned this there. The Israelites leave Egypt, and what's the first thing they do? Complain. We had better food in Egypt. Is that correct, Rabbi? 100%. 100%. His mic was not on, so I'm telling you what he said. That's right. We had better food. This manna, they weren't starving in the desert, but they got tired of a daily dose of manna. So they said, hey, we ate better as slaves. Let's go back to slavery. That is exactly the human condition. I want to be taken care of is infinitely deeper than I want to be free. That is the appeal of the left. That is why the left wins, because the left appeals to human nature. We who love freedom do not appeal to human nature. We are fighting human nature. In America, a Republican runs or a Democrat runs and says, vote for us, this is what we'll do for you. A Republican runs and says, vote for us, we'll do less for you. Who wins? Right? People don't want freedom, they want money. They want free health care, free college, free high school, free everything free. I am convinced, and I mean the following literally, the addiction to things, the addiction to benefits is greater than the addiction to heroin. It is harder to break. I know a lot about drug addiction. It is breakable. It is not breakable, the addiction to benefits. Once it starts, no one is willing to give it up because they don't even think they're addicted. A heroin addict knows he's addicted. A benefits addict thinks he's entitled. That's why in America they're called entitlements. If you're entitled, how could it be bad? This is huge. Freedom is a value, not an instinct. People want to be taken care of. In effect, we have the difference between the American and French revolutions. American Revolution was for liberty, the French Revolution was for equality. I know they did liberté, égalité, and fraternité, but the liberté part was irrelevant. Once there's égalité, you could say au revoir to liberté. Okay? You say bye-bye, auf Wiedersehen, whatever your language is. Yes, I was just going to ask you. I really was, but I knew I wouldn't be able to repeat it. That was the problem. But Kissenem Sepen, nevertheless. This is the battle. The French Revolution versus the American Revolution is the battle. Europeans went for the French Revolution. Equality, equality, equality. So yes, we guillotined a few people, so what? As Lenin said, you gotta crack eggs to make omelets. Well, that's it. America took the tougher road, freedom. And that's why the French ultimately gave the Statue of Liberty, not to itself, not to Britain, not to Germany, to America, because it was known as the land of liberty. Sweet land of liberty goes one of the most famous American songs, but that's dying. America has much less liberty than when I grew up as a child. There's no comparison. It is so much less free. It's breathtaking. And of course, it applies to freedom of speech. And Pew Research did a poll. This is not liberal, not conservative. Pew Research, it did a poll, found that 40% of young Americans do not believe in freedom of speech for hate speech. When I was a child, the Nazis, American Nazis, marched in Skokie, Illinois. You know why they marched in Skokie? Because there were a lot of Jewish Holocaust survivors living in Skokie. So these sadists, and you have to be a sadist to be a Nazi. It's not, I don't know if you cannot be a sadist and be a Nazi. It's a qualification. They went there to shove the swastika in the faces of people whose families had been exterminated. The ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, defended their right to march. So did Jewish groups. Because the liberal value is you can be despicable in America. You are free to be despicable with your words. That is the American value. That's real hate speech, not when I go to a college. The left calls everything it differs with hate speech, which is exactly what the Hungarian minister was talking about. And so that's what that was allowed in Illinois. They were allowed to march, and the Jews defended it, and the ACLU, because that's free speech. Because the moment you say the Nazis can't march in Skokie, well, where do you stop? So that's the American view. That's why in America you can deny the Holocaust. In Europe you can't deny the Holocaust. Because you've never had free speech like America has free speech. Never. It has never existed in Europe like it exists in the United States. That's a perfect example. Anyone who denies the Holocaust is scum. That is the definition of human scum. And I think they should be allowed to be scum. That's the way it works, because once you stop there, where do you start there? When do you stop? Because then if you say, hey, I don't think that Norway is right, that you should have 50% of boards of directors females, well, you can't say that. You're a misogynist. Right? That's a perfect example, by the way, of equality versus freedom. Who the hell is the Norwegian government to tell a company how many women are going to be on its board? And by the way, why stop at women? Why not short people? I'm not kidding. There are disproportionately taller people on boards of directors. And I say that as a tall person. It's just not fair. It's endless. It's just endless. Who the hell is the Norwegian government to tell a company, a private company, who they will have on their board? Norwegians don't give a damn, however, about what I just said. It means nothing, because they don't care about freedom much in Norway, or Sweden, or Denmark, or this country. That's the way it is. It's not a big deal, freedom. Get it? So you could pass laws like that. It's only fair. No, it isn't fair. Fair is I get to choose who my directors are. That's fair. You are not going to define for me what is fair. But in Europe, it's accepted. Who's going to fight? Somebody has to fight for this. There are people up here fighting for it. Every European who fights for freedom, I tell you, I salute you. It's a tough continent. The left has a stranglehold on discourse here, much more than in America. I have been on radio for 35 years. I have millions of listeners. I am what's called in America a talk show host. You don't have talk radio in Europe. And if you do, it's just another leftist repeat of what the BBC said. It's irrelevant. As Stephen Harper, the former Prime Minister of Canada, said to me at one of the Prague University conferences, let me tell you, the CBC is worse than CNN. CBC is the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. Freedom is not a value on the left. It just isn't. Maybe sexual freedom, but that's about it. Drugs freedom, but not any other. So you got to decide in Europe, and I'm not here to preach to you. I say this in America. We're losing this battle in America, but here I am in Europe. So you got to decide. Is freedom more important? Is liberty a major value or not? Or is taking care of you better? I remember George W. Bush running for president, and it was a public forum, and a woman got up and said, if you're elected president, what will you do for me? And I realized that's why I can't run for office, because I know what I would have said. Nothing. That would have been my answer, running for president. Madam, I will do nothing for you. And I hold that as a beautiful thing, because I don't care about what I will do for you. I care what I will do as president for America. That's what John F. Kennedy's famous line was in his inaugural address, when liberals were liberal and not leftists. John F. Kennedy said, ask not what you can do for your country, ask what your country can do for you. If somebody said that today, they'd be called a fascist. The New York Times would call such a politician a fascist. So we got a big decision to make on whether or not we value freedom. The Hungarian minister had the courage to speak about the Islamic immigration. You can't talk about the Islamic immigration in Europe or the United States. Are there great Muslims? Of course there are great Muslims. There are great Muslims, great Jews, great Christians, great atheists, great everything. Are there miserable of every group? Yes. However, Muslims are bringing with them different values, just like, and to prove it has nothing, of course, it has nothing to do with race, because there's no Muslim race. But secondly, I give a proof on my radio show. New Yorkers who emigrate to Florida do exactly the same thing to Florida that South Americans do to the United States and Muslim immigrants do to Europe. Change their values. People bring values with them. They may not bring money, but they do bring values. You know what? Jews are leaving Sweden. You know why Jews are leaving Sweden? Not because of Swedes, but because of Muslim immigrants. That's why. Jerusalem Post reported it. The New York Times didn't report it because it goes against what the Times wants you to believe, that this is just a hunky-dory immigration. Everything's working out great. Angela Merkel, I'm shaking my head not out of contempt, out of sadness, just out of sadness. Angela Merkel proves a famous Jewish teaching that I learned in yeshiva as a child, and that is Judaism holds you're born with two wills, a good will and a bad will, Yetzer Tov, Yetzer Ra. So the rabbis of the Talmud, the second holiest book in Judaism, asked, why did God make a bad urge? Why didn't he just make a good urge? And then the rabbis answered, because without a bad urge, a man wouldn't marry, wouldn't make a home, wouldn't take a profession. So I realized as a kid, sounds like the bad urge is a pretty damn good thing. And it is. The good urge gets, as a rabbi said to me when I was in my late 20s, I went to him for advice, Rabbi Wolf Kelman, may he rest in peace. He said to me, Dennis, I got to tell you something. I got my bad urge under control. It's my good urge that gets me in trouble. That's Angela Merkel. She's a living embodiment of that. We screwed up in the Holocaust, so we'll undo the damage and let in 1 million people who share none of our values. Isn't that beautiful? Because people work on feelings much more than reason. That's what happened. So, that's what they said in Sweden. Hey, you know, a former Swedish minister was asked about Swedish values. You know what she said? Swedish values? What are those? That's when you really didn't teach your children what your country stands for. When a minister of your country says, I don't know what our values are. In England, they prosecute a Christian clergy who won't perform a same-sex marriage. It's mind-boggling. Until 10 years ago, there was no such thing as same-sex marriage in secular life. Within 10 years, it's an astonishing thing. You are a hater if you think that marriage should be defined male or female. I happen to believe neither side is haters. There are good people who believe in same-sex marriage. There are good people who believe in male-female marriage. They can't say that because the left knows only they are good. It is not possible to differ with the left and be a decent human being. It is not possible. Should we have changed it? I was against changing it. A, because I do take my values from the Bible, but even if I were secular, I knew that there was a very damaging argument on the same-sex marriage issue. And the argument was very simple. It was gender doesn't matter. And as soon as I heard that, I said, you've got to be kidding. Gender doesn't matter? And now look what's happened. Gender really doesn't matter. In the United States of America, routinely in high schools in the United States, male bodies who consider themselves female run against female bodies and win all the races. Not one feminist group in America has spoken out against this. Only Martina Navratilova, who is a lesbian, great tennis champion, she said this is not fair to women to have male bodies who consider themselves transgender females compete against female bodies. She was kicked out of the LGBTQ movement for saying that. A lifelong lesbian activist kicked out because, hey, gender doesn't matter. Gender doesn't matter. You really believe that? But you can't say what I'm saying in good parts of Europe. This is considered hate speech. What is hateful about it? That I think women should be only racing against women? Biological women? Why is that hate? Why isn't it hatred of women to allow male bodies to win the races? Why isn't that hate? Nationalism. This is the new one. Nationalism is racism, et cetera, et cetera. Folks, nationalism is good when it is good and bad when it is bad. Just like anything else. Almost nothing is intrinsically bad or good. Is war good? Yes, the war against the Nazis was good. The war of the Nazis against the West was bad. Some wars are moral, some wars are immoral. Sometimes nationalism is moral, sometimes it's immoral. You can't even say that in leftist company. Nationalism is racism. I don't know what they're talking about. I think it's wonderful that a Bulgarian is proud of Bulgaria. I think that's healthy. I like it. I've asked every European young person I've come into contact in the last 2 weeks with 200 of my listeners from America that I've taken on the Rhine River. And I've asked every young European a question. So if he was Dutch, I would say, do you first feel Dutch or European? If he was German, do you first feel German or European? Whatever it might be, I'm just curious. I want them to say, first I feel, this is just a feeling even. It's good, it's healthy to feel that. It doesn't mean anything to feel European. And by the way, why is that not noble? Why is that noble? You don't feel Asian. Why isn't that exclusive? Why is feeling European noble, but feeling Albanian is ignoble? I want to know. No one's ever given me an answer. You're exclusive if you're European. That means you don't feel North American. Oh, I am hurt. I am devastated. Now, why is that? No, seriously, why is that any more noble than feeling Albanian or Hungarian or French? I don't get it. It is a beautiful thing to have commitment to a specific people. It is a beautiful thing. If you're only committed to your people, you are truly reprehensible. But if you are only committed to humanity, you're worthless. That's why the Bible, again, my favorite book, says love your neighbor as yourself. It doesn't say love everyone as yourself. You know why? It's easy to love everyone. It's hard to love your neighbor. It's called the Rational Bible. That's in volume 2. These are big deals. We live in the age of foolishness. We do. Everything I have said to you is obvious. I used to say on the radio, I gave up. Until about 10 years ago, I used to say every so often, folks, it's incredible how much money I am paid to say the obvious. That's what I felt. I couldn't believe it. What a lucky guy. I make a good living as a talk show host in America, and I say the obvious every day. Everything I have said to you should be obvious. It's a good thing to feel French. It's a good thing to feel an obligation to your fellow Hungarians. Why is that a bad thing? I don't get it. I don't know. Why is it better to feel just European or just a human being? Do you know that Superman gave up his American citizenship? Superman was founded in the 1930s in America by Jewish cartoonists who were liberals. And his motto was truth, justice, and the American way. That was Superman's motto. The leftists who took over Superman dropped the motto, no more American way. Now he stood in front of the United Nations about 8 years ago in the cartoon strip and said, I am no longer American, I am a citizen of the world. That's the left versus liberal. Perfect example. Liberals celebrated truth, justice, and the American way. And by the way, if Dutch celebrate truth, justice, and the Dutch way, I'm all for Dutch Superman. I am. I think it would be a great thing. Limited government. You can't have freedom if you have big government. The bigger the government, the smaller the citizen. I came up with that phrase years ago was apparently quoted by a Supreme Court justice, not using my name, but it didn't matter. The left already attacked him for quoting Dennis Prager. It is hilarious. I just saw it yesterday. But yes, I came up with this phrase, and it's true. The bigger the government, the smaller the citizen. That's exactly right. We are big if the government isn't. We become cogs, but it's people don't care if they're cogs. They don't care if they are small. They care if they're fed well and get things for free, and that nobody has more than them. That really bugs the left. Never bothered me that my neighbor had a Cadillac. It's true, I swear to you. My neighbor in Brooklyn, New York, he had a Cadillac. My poor father had an Oldsmobile, which you may not have heard of either. Well, Cadillac you've certainly heard of. In America, when I grew up, there were 5 GM cars: Cadillac, Buick, Oldsmobile, Pontiac, and Chevrolet. And everyone knew your income by which one you drove. We drove Oldsmobiles because we were the middle of the middle class. My neighbor drove a Cadillac. It never occurred to anybody in my family to resent Mr. Klein. I never knew his first name because as kids in my age, you only called adults Mr. and Mrs. Not anymore. Hi, I'm Jerry. This is the way adults say hello to kids. But this is a new thing to me. You resent people who are richer than you? Why is that? The old American attitude to the rich was, gee, how do I get rich? Now, it's let's make the rich poor. Big difference. That's the European attitude. And now it's become the American attitude. Freedom, finally. There's so much to talk to you, but I want to hear questions from you. And, or even alternate small, brief speeches. I don't care, that's fine with me. The Liberty Bell of the United States is the most iconic symbol of the American Revolution. It's called the Liberty Bell. I don't expect you to know it, but every American knows it. Do you know what is written on the Liberty Bell? Only one thing, a verse from the Torah. And you shall proclaim liberty throughout the land to all its inhabitants, from the book of Leviticus. Nobody even knows what Leviticus is today. If I said to somebody, which I am, I'm writing a commentary on Leviticus, they would probably think it's an Italian food or something else. They would have no idea. Leviticus? What is Leviticus? They not only knew what Leviticus was, they knew Leviticus, the founders of America. You had to know Hebrew to get a BA from Harvard until 1800. The insignia of Yale University is in Hebrew, Urim v'Tumim, what the chief priest in the Bible would wear on his breastplate, in Hebrew, on the Yale University insignia. America's changed radically from a Judeo-Christian country to a secular left country. It is not a better country for doing so. And it is certainly not a freer country. The Liberty Bell was for liberty, and they said God wants us to have liberty. That's pretty powerful. So this is where we're at, and the things are quite troubling here in Europe and in America. The free speech issue is just unbelievable. Prager University is what I am the president of, obviously named after me. I'm very touched. It wasn't my idea, but I accepted it, the honor. And anyway, we have 1 billion views a year. We're the largest conservative video site on earth. We are seen all over the world. That's why I lectured in Romania last year to 1,500 young people in Cluj and Bucuresti. And it's a wonderful thing that we're doing. It needs to be done much, much more. Do you know that YouTube, which is owned by Google, has put 80 of our 400 videos. We put out a video every single week of 5 minutes. They're all 5 minutes long. We have 4 prime ministers who have done videos for us, liberal professors, conservative professors. It's a very distinguished group of people who've done videos for us. And 80 of them are lumped with pornography on the restricted list of YouTube. Google owns YouTube. 80. Example, Alan Dershowitz, the Harvard law professor, liberal, Democrat, gave a 5-minute talk on the founding of Israel was legal. That's it, just the legality of Israel's founding. And he even said he's against settlements. We don't care. You can have your opinion on our website. And that's on the, anything that defends America is on the restricted list. What is a restricted list? If your family has filters against pornography and violence, then you can't see anything that's on restricted list. So along with pornography and gratuitous violence are 80 Prager University videos. We have sued them. I hope it goes to the Supreme Court of the United States. The Wall Street Journal wrote 4 editorials on us last year because it's the biggest example of the suppression of speech. Anything that the left differs with is immediately on the suppressed list. Immediately. They don't care when we have a psychiatrist give a talk on how you should forgive your parents if you can. That's okay. That they allowed through. But anything the left differs with is suppressed. If they could, they would shut us down immediately. We're too big. But they're working their way up. The left has never valued liberty, ever. Liberals value liberty. Conservatives value liberty. The left has never valued it. Since Stalin called Trotsky a fascist, all they know how to do is smear and destroy their opponents. That's it. That's all they know to do. That's why if you say, I want to protect the West, you're called a white supremacist. Is that unbelievable? If you say there's only one race, the human race, you're a racist. Because then you deny the left's belief that black is important. Black is not important. White is not important. Anyway, the idiocy of how could somebody like myself, how could any Jew be a white supremacist? Who killed the Jews? Weren't the Nazis white? The idea is so preposterous. A Jewish white supremacist? Think about it for a second, how moronic that is. What color were the Nazis? Green? Do you understand? The lies are so intense, the suppression of our other views is so great and successful that everything I'm telling you is like a breath of fresh air, because you don't get to hear it. And because conservative organizations, by and large, are too weak to fight, they're worthless. Like the conservative organization that I learned just recently backed out of sponsoring me. I don't even know why. You heard me now. What did I say that violates one conservative principle? Or one liberal principle? To say, there are black dormitories at American universities. Do you know who support that? The left. You know who else supports that? The Ku Klux Klan. The only people to support black dormitories on campuses are the leftists and white racists like the Ku Klux Klan. Liberals don't support it and conservatives don't support it. The left is, in Harvard they have separate graduation ceremonies for blacks. That's what they did yes, Harvard. I'm glad you look disgusted. It's good. Carry the disgust out of the room for at least 2 days and it would have been worth coming to Brussels. This is what they do on American campuses. Black dorms, black graduations. I was raised as a liberal. How could I not be? I was a Jewish New Yorker. And I was taught that racial integration is the ideal. And now I'm taught racial segregation is the ideal. So that's the story. I ask you to value freedom. Everything emanates from that. The Liberty Bell should be all of our icons, and it wouldn't hurt to put a verse from the Bible on it. Europe is the most godless continent in the history of humanity. It's an experiment. Europe is engaged in an experiment. Can we maintain our values with a dead God, with no God? I am certain, if I were an atheist, I would be certain it will not work. It's a very, very arrogant belief. We got our values from this book. We got our values from people who believed in a God who gave the Ten Commandments, but we don't need the Ten Commandments or that book or that God anymore because we are enlightened Europeans or Americans. It's a real radical experiment. There's never existed a civilization without a God. It's quite an attempt. I don't think it'll work. Thanks for having me. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so that was Dennis Prager, and some of us love him and follow him, and
some don't.
yes, I was going to say this. Okay, and now you got to see why. He's very passionate about what he believes. If you have any problem at all with what he said, you can blame me because I invited him. I personally invited him. And I don't appreciate, as I said again, as a European, I don't appreciate that somebody or some people and some groups try to stop this event from happening. I don't appreciate it because I do believe that Europe is based on freedom, or that it should be based on freedom. I was brought up with that belief, and I do see that freedom being lost today, and I worry, and that was the reason why we organized this event. But if you are happy that Dennis is here, you don't have to thank me. You should thank the person that introduced me to Dennis, and that is our good friend Robert Florczak and his wife. And once again, thank you so much. It is an honor that we have you here both. So we'll go into questions. I would like to hear also what you have to say or what you think about what was said here today. And I see that at least a couple of members of parliament, we can give, if anyone would like to raise their hands, we can start with the members of parliament and maybe go through some other questions. Daniel, you're free? No. Nothing to add. Okay. MEP Wimmers. This is MEP-elect. He just got elected. He's a very good friend, and thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Mr. Prager, for great remarks. It's indeed refreshing to hear such an unapologetic conservatism being, being discussed in this House. It's quite rare, I'll tell you. But I would like to elaborate a little bit on hate speech because it's codified law in Sweden, and historically it has been used to strike down upon anti-Semitism. Right now, what we see in the European Parliament is of course the same sort of efforts to try to widen the definition of hate speech into meaning practically everything that goes against the values of the left. And we've had, pastors being prosecuted in Sweden for, discussing the Bible and homosexuality. And you may like the content of that or not, but it's a fact. He was prosecuted. In the UK, they prosecute critics of the Quran and Islam. And while at the same time, I'm thinking, should we, as friends of Jewish life in Europe, should we do away with this tool in a time when, for instance, my home country, Sweden that is, see the aliyah of Jews? They can't live there anymore. I just visited Malmö. It's terrible. So it's quite an act of balance here. And what would be your advice to fellow conservatives in Europe struggling with this conflict of interests, if you will?
Look, I said that I believe that people who deny the Holocaust, who I consider as bad as the people who dropped the gas into the gas chambers, I believe they should have the right to do so. I see what has happened it never stops with legitimate, true evil. The left will always use any opening to wreck. To wreck. That's it. I'll tell you why. This took me a lifetime to figure out. I figured it out 5 years ago in writing my Genesis commentary. God creates the world in 6 days. Forget 24-hour period. It's of no interest to me how long it took. But it's 6 days, because what are we going to say, 6 billion years, and you have the Sabbath every billion years? So obviously 6 days. Okay. But it's not, God didn't create for 6 days. God made order for 6 days. He also created. The left is a force of chaos. I studied the left. I was at the Russian Institute at Columbia University. I speak Russian. I studied Russian to read Pravda. And I went to the Soviet Union, as I said earlier, at a very young age, and I went a number of times again. I've studied the left my whole life. And I wrote a book on the left, on America, and on Islamic values. And I've studied it, and I realized if you ask a Jew, what book should I read to understand your beliefs? All right, here's the Bible, here's the Torah, here's the Talmud, whatever. Christian, here's the New Testament, here's the whole Bible. Fine. You ask a leftist, what book should I read to understand leftism? He has no answer. He's not going to say Das Kapital. First of all, you won't read it, because you will sleep within 2 or 3 pages. It is useless, and it is silly. So what will he give you? He doesn't have a book. And then I realized there's no book because there is no doctrine. Leftism is chaos. That's why they love change. The artwork in this building is chaos. That's all it is. It's not art. Watch Mr. Florzak's video on modern art at PragerU in 5 minutes. It's not art. This is The Emperor is Naked. It's garbage. It's chaos. It means nothing. I conduct orchestras as an avocation. I know the arts, and I really know music real well. Atonal music was chaos. That's all it was. It was chaos. It wasn't music. It was the use of musical instruments to make sounds, but not sounds that amounted to anything intellectually or passionately. It was useless, but it was chaos, and they love chaos. When Barack Obama's people won, you know what their motto was? We are the change we were waiting for. That doesn't mean anything. Do you understand that? It is a phrase that means nothing. Why do they love change? Not because change brings progress, because they love change. They're bored by the idea that men and women are men and women. It's chaos to say men are not men and women are not women. Chaos is what they aim. Chaos is the natural state of the world. Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Genesis 2, and the earth was null and void. It was chaos. Chaos is the natural state. God makes order. On the second day, nothing is made. Light is separated from dark, and land from water. It's all order. They hate order. That's why the words law and order are to them neo-Nazi. They hate order. The idea that there are principles of beauty by which you measure Beethoven versus Stockhausen? No. You like Stockhausen, I like Beethoven. People call my show, hey, you like Shakespeare? Hey, I like Batman. End of issue. Right? There is no standards. As George Will, a major American conservative thinker, said on my radio show right before I left to Europe, he said, for the left, nothing is fixed. That's what it is. That's why, yes, there is a tension. Well, if these people could say, you know, Auschwitz was made up, it's a lie, then that's a horrible thing. It is a horrible thing. But next thing you won't be able to say, there's only one race, the human race. Or they're lumped, as you in Sweden know. Hey, a pastor says, I'm sorry, I love you, I honor you, you are created in God's image, but I can't marry you because my Bible says marriage is between a man and a woman. Sorry, you're a hater. you're lumped with Nazis. That's why, ultimately, except for shouting fire in a crowded theater, we have to be absolutists on free speech, because the left will destroy as soon as there is any opening. I'm sorry, that's what I believe. What would you like me to turn it off?
Yeah. I think the State Secretary had something to say quickly, and then we can take some more questions. Yeah.
Just a short sentence on that, because I cannot take myself back on things that Mr. Prager is saying. And first, thank you very much for the Hungarian example. It was a great honor. Nők, férfiak, a great story. And yes, we are there to speak out things because we don't have anything to be afraid of. That's also important. Now, leftism is chaos. That's what you say. And I have a theory. It might be true, it might be not true. But the theory of mine is that why are the big so-called people's parties, most of all the Social Democrats, but also other parties, are in such a trouble and in such a crisis? I have a good explanation for that, because they have nothing to say. There is no content, real content in their politics. I mean, this is not a content to make propaganda for same-sex marriage. It's not a content. You cannot win elections with that. Or any other issue that is kind of like, how should I say that, seems to be popular, but in the content it has nothing to do with what is really important for the people. So that means that these parties are really empty and they have nothing to say. Most of all the Social Democrats. So that's why I wanted to. Leftism is chaos. That's in a certain sense completely true. And I do agree with that. We have if I may say, Mr. Prager, we have not the best opinion on liberal, on liberalism in Europe altogether, which is not a liberalism, but they call it liberalism. That's probably the problem. If it would be a real liberalism, then it would be okay. So we have this very nice debate on illiberal democracy that was spoken out by Prime Minister Orbán versus liberal democracy. And there is a council of the very wise people, 3 men, controlling the Hungarian Fidesz party, if they are democratic enough. And one of the questions of this 3 men was, what does Orbán mean by illiberal? And he explains it very well, and the point is that left is chaos. They have nothing to believe in. And we have something to believe in. We have our fundaments, Christian values or Judeo-Christian traditions, family. All these values are nationality. I'm not saying nationalism, but nationality. Proud Hungarians, proud Slovakians, proud Romanians, proud who else, whatever. It's important to be proud of your own nationality. I completely agree with you. So these are values, I think, and these are values that we would like to represent in the future as well, here in this building as well. Thank you. Sorry.
Folks, I'm going to take a 5-minute break. I'll be right back. Please don't leave, because I have endless time. But give me 5 minutes. I'll be right back.
Yeah, thank you so much for the speech, a great speech. I must say, as ECPM and Salox, I think we have a bit more moderate view on the left, because there are also people, committed Christians on the left, and we have learned them to know them as such. But I think there is a clear distinction on a kind of totalitarian approach in which you basically cannot accept other points of view. And we sometimes see this happening on the liberal left indeed. And On the other hand, I know personally a lot of people on the left who are simply very much committed to fight poverty, to fight inequality, to fight these things that generally conservatives actually agree with. When it comes, well, actually we all want to fight poverty, we all want to fight inequality and so on. They have just a different distinction between the left and the right, but we would rather, I think, make a very clear distinction on unfreedom and freedom. And I think it's very good that Mr. Prager has the opportunity here to voice his points and to make his points, because that is what freedom in essence means, even though we may not agree with everything he said, or he probably will not agree with everything what we this is, I think, the most important point, that we fight for the freedom to be able to disagree, agree with those who are worried about the way sometimes that simply certain opinions are simply dismissed or pushed away simply because they are different from the mainstream. This is always something we have to be very much aware of, because, as I always said, if you, as Mr. Prager rightly said, if you start to say, well, this is not, you can't say that, and then what's the next thing you cannot say? We may differ on the degree in which you can enforce for certain points on law, whether there should be something as hate speech, but I think we all can agree on the fundamental principle of the freedom of speech and opinion. Thank you.
I think Johannes and everyone, I think that's exactly the point. The point is about freedom, whether we want to keep freedom or not, and the point is which platform gives that freedom. Because, as I said, the whole point of this conference is about freedom of speech, and the side wants that freedom of speech, even though it can also be offensive, because Dennis is a Jewish person, and obviously he had family that died in the Holocaust, and it's not a joy of his life to hear that the Holocaust didn't exist or so forth. It's not what he wants to hear, but he is willing to sacrifice that because he still believes that freedom is important. So I hope that makes sense. We are still waiting in a few more minutes. Maybe shall we take questions, or maybe MEP Branislav, if you have something you want to say before we...
I see myself to make closing remarks, so I will wait.
Okay, so we'll take questions and then we can try because of the time. Yes.
So
Stella.
thank you very much. I have two
Would you
questions.
like to introduce yourself first?
My name is Stella Velica. I'm simply citizen, and I have studied physics and informatics, and I'm very interested in the freedom of religion. I would like to ask two questions for Mr. Prager, who is now here. I have a big problem with minorities that are the migration people which are bringing a lot of new values that he said, and the most of these values they are not compatible with our values in Europe, and it can be a big problem in the future. And my question is, how can we make these people, migrants with, I give only an example, the most they are Muslim, and how can we make these people to respect first our value, and after that to have their freedom of religion? What I'm thinking was, first is education, to teach in the school the Bible, Torah, and the Quran, and to interpret it, but obligatory this in every European school. And secondly is the second is how can we do on the European level? I believe in European institutions, so sorry, but I believe in that. And I only want to know how can we do it on a European level to put these people to accept first our values and our civilization.
So
and second question is, for Mr. Prager, is coming back, is how you will see the relationship between Russia, Europe, and US. Because in Russia you have no freedom. And Russia is, my opinion, very interested to destroy the European civilization. I am sorry to say that, but I see not people, the Russian people, I said the government.
Okay, so I will take a few more questions. I think
Should I say anything on that?
just, yes, of course, just take a few more, yes?
Thank you. My name is Rudy Roth. I'm an investigative reporter. I have a couple of very short questions, but first a little statement for Mr. From Hungary. I will not try to pronounce your name, sorry, because people say a lot about anti-Semitism in Hungary and Poland. Well, there's one example in Wrocław in Poland in 2015. Somebody burned a Jewish effigy, a puppet. He was condemned twice, in appeal as well. In Antwerp, in June 2002, the same thing happened by a group of leftists, NGOs, a Muslim group. Even Oxfam was in the organization of that group. Nothing happened. You know who was the Prime Minister in Belgium at that moment? Mr. Guy Verhofstadt. Okay, well known. Yes, okay. So just this remark, when Mr. Verhofstadt will teach you a lesson, remind him of what happened in 2002 in Belgium. Questions for Mr. Prager. How would you see, because you talked about Holocaust denial, and in Belgium we have this very specific, it's against rightist, but when leftists or Muslims do Holocaust denial, there's nothing. Even some people of the Ligue des Droits de l'Homme, I will set his name, Jean-Marie Dermagne, he gets conspiracy theories around that there are only few central banks and not in the hands of the Rothschilds. So leftist and Muslim, Holocaust denial, nothing. So there may be a good interest for you. And the second question about this one is, how would you accept that in this house, when Mahmoud Abbas comes given a speech and says conspiracy theory that Jewish rabbis called to poison Arabs, what was wrong? And he was applauded by the whole Parliament who was present there. Abbas himself apologized later, but nobody in the Parliament gave any damn to that. Thank you. What your opinion is on that one?
We'll take one more question over there, and then we can give the time to the speaker. Can I also say that, I'm so sorry, I didn't catch your name, but can I just say that we also had the President of Israel here when he spoke, and the whole Parliament also applauded for him. I'm not sure if it was the whole Parliament that applauded for Mahmoud Abbas. I think people are free to come and speak, and obviously some people agree with some and some people agree with others. But yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity. So my question is to Mr. Prager. First, I'm a huge fan, but I would like to challenge you a little bit. I am a nuclear engineer, but when I encounter an other nuclear engineer, I say I'm from Greenpeace just for the, let's say, the beauty of the debate, so please believe in the benevolence of the question. So first, you say the bigger the government, the smaller the people. Isn't it the lower the government, the good governance, the lower the people? Because, for example, in Scandinavian countries where let's say the government is quite predominant, you have a high rate of happiness in it. But you have a good governance. For example, there is a politician that has to resign because she bought a tablet of chocolate, of Toblerone, with the card of the party, and she has to resign from it to make public excuses. So that's the first thing. Isn't it the root cause of, let's say, less freedom of the people?
Yes, sorry, yes. Okay, I just wanted to give 1 minute to Rabbi Margolin, because he didn't have the chance to speak, and then Dennis.
Mr. Prager, I think many Europeans will find it a bit tough to analyze what you just said today. But at the same time, I think that the buildings that hosted so many, unfortunately, people who support terror cannot boycott you to speak at this parliament. If I understood correct, you're not a big fan of the left, right? Is that correct, what you just said?
Not a big fan.
Well, I still truly believe that we have to judge people by their action and not by the ways they define themselves. This is our mission, is to bring the good values and everything that, as a believer, I don't know if you realize, but I'm a believer Jew. And as a believer, we know that whatever exists in this world is what created by God. So the left is also created by God. There is a great reason for this, because they could bring many, many good and positive values. And this is our mission, to try to bring the values, the positive values, one by one, because light have a great nature, that it pushes away darkness. So I truly believe that there's no other way to push darkness but by illuminate more and more light and positive values. Thank you.
Well, I'll begin with the last. It's an interesting philosophical question. Did God make the left? I don't know. I'm not comparing them to Nazis. Did God make the Nazis? Is there something to be learned from them? There is no one, even Nazis, everyone has done some good. A lot of times people argue with me, well, do you not acknowledge the left has done some good? I don't know who hasn't done any good. It is not possible to have a movement that does no good. So I can only speak for me, Rabbi. I assess people and movements not by the question, did it do any good, but did it do more good than bad? All of us are on a scale. I've done some bad in my life, but I hope that I've done a lot more good than bad. I think the left has done a lot more bad than good. So I want to, I wouldn't be devoting my life to a Bible commentary if I wasn't trying to bring light into darkness. So I just wanted to just comment on that. What country are you from, if I may ask? You sir, yeah. From where? Belgium. Oh, from Belgium, okay.
French-speaking Belgium.
Yes, je sais. So what I caught in your question, you mentioned that the bigger government seems to correlate with higher degrees of happiness.
No, this particular case in the Scandinavian countries, if you have the ranking of the countries where you have the most happiness, you have Finland, Norway, Sweden, second time, top 5, and those countries actually have big governments.
Right, okay, so the countries that are rated with the greatest happiness, like Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, seem to have larger governments. Right, so I did hear you correctly, good. So I wrote a book on happiness, so you're really asking me a subject that I've given a great deal of thought to. What if I said to you, I'm not saying this, but what if I said to you, gee, isn't that interesting? Norway, Denmark, Finland, Sweden are almost 100% racially, ethnically, religiously homogeneous. Maybe that's why they're happy. You wouldn't like that argument, would you? Because it sounds racist. But by the way, it has nothing to do with being racist. Are the Japanese happy? They're not white. They're completely homogeneous. By the way, that's why there's almost no crime in Japan, because it's completely racially homogeneous. People tend not to kill their own, except in civil wars. So it's a challenge to have multicultural, multi-ethnic, so on, like in America. And we had an answer, e pluribus unum. One of the 3 mottos of America was out of many one. So we don't care if you're black, we don't care if you came from Sweden, or if you came from Italy, or if you came from Japan. now become an American, which is what, by the way, I advocate in Belgium. I don't care where you came from, but become Belgian. I don't care where you came from, become German. That's why I wrote a book advocating these values. I don't know that the reason for their happiness is larger government. There's a very powerful government in Russia, and Russians are very unhappy. That's why they drink so much. And by the way, Scandinavians drink a lot too, and I'm not sure how happy they are. I think it's a very interesting question. I don't know how you measure happiness, so I don't accept any of those statistics. What are people going to say when you ask them? Yes, frankly, I'm miserable. Most people will say I'm happy or whatever, and I don't know what criteria they use. I've been to those countries many times. With all respect, truly respect to your Swedish colleague there, Swedes are not known for being particularly happy. They, from a non-Swede, I had a friend who studied in Sweden the year I was studying in England, and it made a big impact upon me, things that he would report. And I have nothing against Sweden. I have nothing against any country, frankly. But I don't know how happy Swedes are. I think it's a very fair question. So this notion that it's the government, but not necessarily homogeneity, I just don't know. I just read a wonderful book by an Englishman who lives in Denmark, and he says it's quite overrated how happy everybody is in these countries. And by the way, even happiness is complex, because what if you're happy without freedom? What if you're taken care of completely, but you don't care about liberty? I'd rather be less happy and have more liberty than more happy and less liberty. That's very American of me, I admit, but I think it's a good thing. So it's a fair question and a good one. As to the women-man question, I guess that was in reaction to my statement about in Norway telling boards of directors that they had to have 50% women. Yeah. Again, it's a liberty question. You should be free. People should be free, period. Will they use their freedom to do wrong things? Are there anti-women bigots on some boards? Yes. Most companies, however, want to make money more than they hate women. That's between the two. How much do I want to suppress women and how much money do I want to make? Most people want to make money more than they want to suppress women. That's why in America, when we hear this argument, oh, women make 87 cents to the dollar that men make, there's such an obvious question. Then why hire any men? You're a fool if you can get the exact same work from women, you will save 13% just by only hiring women. So I'm skeptical of these things. And yes, freedom comes with a price. Benjamin Franklin, one of the founders of the United States, was said to a woman who asked about, will America survive? And he said something to the effect, it is a republic if you can keep it. And Washington and all the founders said, we will only have a free country if people have good values. Freedom is dependent, that's why freedom was dependent on, in America, on people being based on the Judeo-Christian value system. That was the notion. You can only be free if you have good values. You have to get your good values from somewhere. It doesn't come from the human. By the way, one final word from me on this, unless I'm happy to take any more, but here is the great dividing question. It has nothing to do with God. Do you believe people are basically good? Religious, Judeo-Christian value says no. Conservatives say no. The more left you get, the more they say yes. You can watch on YouTube I debated two left-wing Berkeley students at the University of California, Berkeley. And I said, this is the best way I could make any approach, keeping much of what you said in mind. Let me just talk to left-wing students. I won't give a speech. So my final question to them was, do you believe people are basically good? And of course they said yes. And I said, well, that's the difference. To believe people are basically good, maybe Europeans believe it less because your continent has been filled with so much slaughter. I don't know how a European could believe people are basically good. It is the silliest belief a human being can have, in my opinion. The silliest, the single stupidest belief you can have is that human nature is good. I don't say it's evil. I think it's a mixed bag, but it isn't good. Who was I with? Oh, yes, I was with a Bulgarian woman on the ship that I had with my listeners, my Rhine trip just now. So I said, how are things in Bulgaria? I have affection for Bulgaria. So I have a special affection for Bulgaria. I like the people, and Bulgaria saved its Jews. So I have, and nobody knows it. So I just have an affection. Anyway, I said, how are things in Bulgaria? And I speak Russian, so when I was in Bulgaria, I always got along easily with people. And so she said, things are really difficult economically. And I knew it because they'd sent no one to Eurovision. Only Ukraine and Bulgaria sent no delegations to the Eurovision. Ukraine was political and Bulgaria was economic. They literally didn't have the money to make an act at Eurovision. So I said, let me guess why things are so bad in Bulgaria. Corruption, correct? And she said, exactly. Corruption is the reason that almost any country is poor, Africa or Europe or anywhere. And yet, so what is corruption? It's organized stealing. But if people are basically good, why is there so much of it? It's a big problem. How you make good people is the most important question you can ask, and the left doesn't ask it. The left asks, how do you fight institutional racism and sexism and so on? I ask, how do you make good people? And the answer is, everyone must fight his nature. You must raise children to fight their nature. That's the religious answer. It is the best answer.
Time has... I'm really sorry because time has really gone, and our guests have to be in other commitments, and Dennis has to travel to Amsterdam. So I want to thank you all for participating. I'm sorry we didn't have more time for questions. As a moderator and as the organizer, the only thing I wanted to say, Dennis, is, other than thank you, obviously, which I thank you already, is to say that you spoke of Western civilization and the difference between the European and the American way. I think, I personally think that both in Europe and in America, different people exist, and some believe in Judeo-Christian values and some don't. People like me, who are very European and never lived anywhere else other than Europe, that have the same Judeo-Christian values that you have. As you can see, we want to build the same future, which is one of freedom for everyone. And so I think sometimes we compare things which is like, you have to compare like for like, basically. That was my point. So, and the only last thing I want to say is that Western civilization was based on Judeo-Christian values, and without them, we could not have the freedom that we obtained. So that is what I base my belief in. Thank you again for coming. I want to thank once again our panel and also our host. We really have gone out of...
There are unanswered questions.
Okay, we really have...
Do you allow me
yes, 1 minute?
1 minute, please.
So we're going to hear from the State Secretary and then straight to our host, who's just going to give our final remarks. Thank you. Yes.
Just two remarks to the lady who asked on the migration and said that people are coming to Europe who are not sharing our values, and first they should accept our values, and then we can talk about their values. Now the problem is that this is, though in a certain sense true, but the problem is that nobody has decided in Europe about the real question, and the real question is that these people should not be let in. It's not the question that, that they should accept what we are saying to them, because it's not even very democratic. The question is that we should stop this flow of illegal migration, which has no democratic legitimation. Nobody has decided upon this, not the prime ministers, not the head of states. I think this is the problem, and as long as we do not stop it, and as long as the so-called Willkommenskultur of the German Chancellor is reigning Europe, I think we are pretty much in a trouble. The gentleman asked me on acts of anti-Semitism not condemned in Western Europe, but very much condemned in Eastern Europe. Double standard. I cannot. That's it. I mean, we have a functioning legal system. We have a functioning laws, and the Hungarian police and the Hungarian authorities are very tough on people who are acting against Jewish compatriots. And the last remark, and that's really last, and it's rather in joke, about the drinking habits of the Scandinavians. I'm happy that you raised it, because I was ambassador in Helsinki 2 years, and the Finns have horrible drinking habits. I'm sorry about that if there are Finns here. I love the Finns, but their drinking habits are really pretty much outrageous. So I have an idea here that probably the reason why everybody thinks that the Scandinavians are that happy is that they drink a lot. Because drinking makes you happy. Could that be, because all the statistics, they are leading all the statistics in happiness in Europe, the Danes, the Swedes, the Finns, and they are changing each other. But there you have, in these countries, especially in Finland, you have the highest rate of suicide in Western Europe. So how does it come together? That's not very convincing. So I'm afraid that there's a famous saying that I believe the statistics that I force myself. I think these statistics are being produced by the Scandinavians, most probably. That's what I can, but once again, and for the camera, I love the Scandinavians, and I love the Finns as well. And I was also accredited to Estonia, and Estonia is a very special country in many senses. So thank you very much again for the opportunity.
Dear friends, this is a real end, and I want to make the end by stressing this thought. Mr. Prager said, and I think we need to take this home, Europe is under an experiment. Will it keep its values if it denies God? Its values spread out from the Bible. Is it possible to keep them functioning if Bible we don't want to take seriously? And this is the truth of the atmosphere of European Parliament, I have to say, out of my experience. I hope that this experiment would not be successful, and we need to bring the change. So thank you very much to all of you. Thank you to all of our panelists and speakers, and may God bless Europe. Amen? Absolutely. Amen.